One of the things that makes me nervous about all of these AI tools with teachers is that AI doesn't know the students.
And so I think the AI literacy component really needs to dig deeper into this. I mean, we have done experiments where we are finding even the changing of one word without giving any information about the student changes the response of the AI.
Compared to previous version of Jill Watson, now we can answer far more questions, far more complex questions, like comparing different things. Students have asked Jill Watson to quiz them and so on.
Every dollar that we will invest and every effort that we will invest in AI within education for marginalized, the return and the impact will be far more than any implementation AI in general education, like in developed countries. Welcome to the Digital Education Dialogue podcast, brought to you by the Digital School, where we explore the ever-evolving intersection of education and technology. I am Waleed Al Ali. I'm delighted to welcome you to season 2 of the series. This season, we've decided to focus on AI in education, to explore how artificial intelligence and emerging technologies are really reshaping learning, teaching, and access to education. Each episode will take a different angle of AI impact, from a human center to design to equity, literacy, personalization of learning, and teacher empowerment. I'm also uh, proud to joining with us as a co-host here, Professor Chris Dede, Senior Research Fellow at Harvard Graduate School of Education and Associate Director for Research at the U.S. National AI Institute for Adult Learning and Online Education. In today's episode, we are focusing on a crucial topic: enhancing educators' training with technologies. Around the world, teacher training is under immense pressure, with rapid shifts in technology, evolving students' needs, and a global teacher shortage. The way we prepare and support educators must change. So, how can AI and digital technologies empower educators, helping them build skills, confidence, and new ways of engaging the students? We are privileged to have two outstanding guests with us today: Karan Taneja, researcher at the Georgia Tech Design Intelligence Lab, specializing in AI for teaching and learning, and Professor Punya Mishra, Associate Dean of Scholarship and Innovation at the Mary Fulton Teachers Colleges at Arizona State University, and a global thought leader in educational innovation. Thank you both for joining us today. And to begin, could you, each of you, maybe take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and share a bit more about your experience and the work you do?
I'm a researcher at Georgia Tech, as Walid mentioned, and I'm currently working under NSFAI Institute for Adult Learning and Online Education, where I develop tools for uh, students to use in classrooms to go through their course material. And these are conversational tools. And more recently, we have started working on multimodal tools that allow STEM subjects, because clearly without figures, STEM subjects are hard to study. And so I'm very excited about this work. We're going to deploy it this semester in classrooms. And
Thank you. I'm Punya Mishra. Actually, there's a correction to my title. I am no longer Associate Dean. I'm currently Director of Innovative Learning Strategies at the Learning Engineering Institute. That's perfectly fine. I think my website might still have the wrong info. Um, and I'm a professor in the Mary Fulton College for Teaching and Learning Innovation at Arizona State University. Most of my work over the past 30 years has focused around educational technology, design, and creativity, with a particular focus on teacher preparation, teacher education, and how technology can be better integrated in that. I've also done quite a bit of work around sort of bringing a design-based perspective to thinking about education, teacher creativity. Currently, of course, everybody's obsessed with AI. So if you go to my website, that's what I've been writing a lot about and thinking a lot about. As somebody who's been in the field for a long time, I think that gives me a sense of perspective on, having seen going from I've actually programmed using punch cards, and then seeing things like HyperCard, and then seeing the internet, and then seeing social media. So I'm not saying that the AI is of the same level, but also having seen these transformations, I mean, having seen the rhetoric around them and the reality of them in the long run, I think gives me a sort of perspective on it that I think is helpful, hopefully. So I've focused a lot on sort of looking at not just sort of the immediacy of using these technologies for teacher education, teacher training, and so on, but also more of the long term, like what kind of implications does that have? Because we tend to, especially given the pace at which this change is happening, we tend to focus on that and not see other things that are shifting as well. So would love to, and thank you for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
And I enjoy working with both Karan in the context of the Institute and Punya in the context of a podcast that we have called Silver Lining for Learning. I've been working a lot with teachers on the ground over the last couple months in school settings. And it's interesting to look at the range of teacher capacity building that's possible now, and also the different preferences that teachers have. So some teachers say, I really want training. I want you to show me in detail exactly how I manipulate these tools so that I'm technologically literate in how to use them. Other teachers are saying, well, training, is kind of narrow. What I'd like is some professional development. I think I can figure out the technical details on my own, but I really want something that speaks to the broader context of what is AI and how is it changing how we teach and how it is it changing potentially what we teach. And then there are other teachers who say, I don't want to have to learn AI. I want to use a system, and I won't use specific names because we're not in the business of marketing. But there certainly are systems that you can purchase a license for that basically say, let's make a PowerPoint for you, or let's make a podcast for you, or put in your syllabus and I'll give you, the lesson plan for today, or whatever. A menu system where the teacher really doesn't, it's magic from the teacher's perspective. But there's also teachers who basically say, I don't want a menu, I want a personal chef. I'm willing to spend some time learning about AI so that I can decide what I want it to do and how I want it to do it. And if I want to make a game in my history class, I want to be able to craft that in AI. So it really has become more complicated than just saying, let's give teachers some professional development or training, or just something that's quote, teacher proof, unquote. And I think the teachers that will get the most out of AI are the ones who are willing to think of it in terms of their control and their needs, as opposed to AI just delivering what it says. But I'm curious, Punya and Karan, how you think about that. Is that spectrum accurate? Do you find your own work centering on one part of that spectrum?
So I think, Chris, that is, that sort of that range of responses that you speak of is true for pretty much every technology that's come along, right? We've always talked about the early adopters, blah, 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 right? So there is that element. I think the other piece here is because this technology is so protean, it can be so many different things to so many different people, that people will naturally sort of gravitate to the parts which they feel most comfortable with, right? So if you have the teacher who has always been about like, how do I take these ideas, of whether it's science or math or music or whatever, and make them accessible in powerful ways to students, they are obviously going to take a different stance towards it than somebody who takes a more instrumental sort of, not that one is wrong or one is better or worse, it's just that our different personalities get reflected, our pedagogical personalities, so to speak, get reflected in how we see and view and use this technology. In my work, and currently the classes that I teach, a large part of my focus really has been on how can we take these technologies in order to build other things, right? And so the goal is to, how do we take, let's say, can we use the coding capabilities of Claude or ChatGPT or whatever to build simulations? And now we have the power in just in plain English for a middle schooler to build a science simulation, which was not a power that was available to others before, right? And so I'm really focused on sort of that aspect of teacher agency in a large part. Partly this comes from a concern with these tools, which will remain unnamed, which, as I've written about, create what I call curriculum-shaped objects. These are things that on the surface look like curriculum. They have all the right structure, like the headings and subheadings seem right. But if you go deeper into it, it seems a little off. That it's playing the game of being a curriculum designer or a lesson plan designer, while really not truly grasping what's going on, and of course not understanding the context and specifics of that particular classroom in that context, right? So what that does is it puts teachers and puts them, so instead of the continuum that you were looking at, I look at a slightly different continuum. I look at sort of knowledge of domain and AI versus knowledge of domain and AI, like more or less. And what we find is that the expert teachers are actually spending more time. They're doing more work, they're doing better work, but they're putting a lot more cognitive effort in fixing the outputs of AI. Novice teachers tend to be more accepting of whatever AI is producing, and sort of just take the output and run with it, even though it may be not appropriate for their context, maybe it is wrong in some reasons, and so on. And so that's an interesting dichotomy that's emerging in my work, which is looking at how do we get novice teachers to become smarter about AI. The expert teachers are doing fine. They're doing great. They're just putting a little bit more work, but they're very happy with the work that they're producing. So those are some of the things that I've been sort of thinking with and then working on in the last few years.
That was great answer, Punya. Building on that, I think there's this new body of knowledge that is emerging in education, where for each specific domain you have a different best way of using AI. And I think it's still kind of under development, and AI tools are themselves improving every day, so that knowledge evolves quickly as well. And like teachers' responsibility now is not just to use those tools, but also to impart that knowledge onto students, so that when they graduate from school or college, they're more, I guess, tech savvy enough to use these AI tools in their workplace.
Dr. Waleed, one of the things that makes me nervous about all of these AI tools with teachers is that AI doesn't know the students. And so it sort of constructs, I guess, a hypothetical, quote, typical, unquote, student. But the digital school and other initiatives like it are dealing with marginalized students. And a teacher that comes in and just tries to teach as if it was some kind of standard, typical student from a semi-privileged background is going to fail. So I know that you've been involved with Arizona State in the DEGA program that prepares teachers to teach marginalized students, and I wonder if you see that as a potential issue with AI, unless we find a way to prompt it that takes into account who the students are.
It's a very good question. I think we've talked about the pace of development in AI, and when we started at the digital school, uh, we needed to prepare educators, and I think the first common thing that whenever we say digital school and digital education, people assumed, or teachers assume that there is no need for teachers and you are getting rid of teachers. And we said, no, we need teachers to be more effective and more impactful. And we want to empower them with technology. And this is why we worked with ASU to build what we called back then the Digital Educator course, and how to teach effectively with technology, when to use it and when not to use it, when in consideration of the infrastructure and the capabilities and the readiness of the people, content, students around you. that was very successful in terms of, bringing people up to speed with the basics of technology literacy. But when we came to AI literacy and how we prepare educators of AI, the question was, you know, how are we going to prepare educators to use technology? Do they have access to technology? And I think the starting point there was, let's make sure they have AI literacy, because I think a big gap right now is people don't realize what is AI, or don't differentiate between searching on AI tool or on a search engine like Google or others. So for us, this was the starting point that we want to step into it. And we are looking at different ways on how we can really teach AI literacy for educators and for students. Of course, the other aspects that you mentioned, Chris, around the different context for students, because they come from marginalized, the expectations are different, the infrastructure is different, is also playing a big role in that. Which reminds me that we also built a very specialized course with Mary Lou Fulton College of Education on social emotional learning for teachers, and another specialized course for students because of this consideration. Now, when it comes to AI, our chairman is Minister of AI in UAE, but we are very careful with using AI with the students, even especially across borders, because until now we are not clear how we can really structure it in a way that will be more effective. The starting point we did with Georgia Tech, with Karen and the team, where we looked at use case scenarios. So let's look at a very structured use case on how we can utilize AI to assist teachers in the teacher training program that we did with ASU. And that's the pilot that we did was successful. I think we'll talk more about it. But I think starting point for deploying AI within education or within students should be considerate of the context that you are working on and the readiness of the students and teachers, but also should be designed to cater a specific context or a scenario to make it relevant and to make it useful. And the building block for that is proper AI literacy for the educators who are going to use it, and of course for the students. And if you don't have that, then you have higher risk, I would say, from using AI, because they will establish certain assumptions and take it with them throughout their use of AI tools across different tools.
If I can just add one layer to that, Chris, is that okay?
Sure.
So there's a great paper that just came out recently out of your colleagues at Harvard, Chris, Mohammad Attari and his colleagues, which is called Which Humans? And they did this really interesting thing. They took the questions from the World Values Survey and they started looking at where does, in their research is focused on ChatGPT, where does it land with respect to different cultures and contexts across the globe on the World Values Survey. And no surprise, it lands bang in the middle of what are known as the weird countries, the Western industrialized, Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And so that's another challenge I think that comes up when we look at its use in global contexts. And again, something I've sort of written about in terms of the flattening of culture. For the classic marshmallow experiment that do where you put a marshmallow and the kid, if the kid stays long enough, then they show resilience or whatever, and they'll do better in life. Turns out that we took it for granted that it would work across cultures. It doesn't. It means different things in different cultures. But this AI has been trained on this massive corpus of data where the marshmallow study is seen as the gold standard of scientific, psychological research. And so now you have the risk that if a student walks or does something in a classroom and a teacher looks up that behavior using this large language model, they're going to get a response which is inappropriate for that particular culture. And so we're going to see. So I think one of the things that, Waleed, the space, particularly that you're working in, it becomes so critically important that AI literacy include this cultural component, include the fact that there are these biases that are baked into it, and no, and that is a part of this technology, whether we like it or not. There is gender bias because it's a mirror reflecting us. And so I think the AI literacy component really needs to dig deeper into this. I mean, we have done experiments where we are finding even the changing of one word without giving any information about the student changes the response of the AI. These are incredibly powerful technologies. And so I think that's a matter of concern that we need to sort of keep in mind as we look at its use in classrooms and other learning contexts.
Ron, do you have thoughts about this? I know that your work with Jill Watson has evolved over time, really, from Jill Watson being an assistant to Jill Watson being, in some ways, a partner with the teacher, not necessarily an equal partner, but an important partner, like almost a co-teacher. And um, that's great, but it also raises issues about what that co-teacher brings in with it. So I'd like to, I know that the team has gone to some trouble to control hallucinations and to make sure that within the limits of current technology that it's behaving in an appropriate way. And it would be great if you could talk about some of that.
I think we realize that specifically in educational context, it's very important to have safety in terms of both like not generating harmful responses and not allowing students to actually prompt in a way that can generate harmful response, and also just being more true to the information that the instructor has approved. So Jill Watson specifically relies on course documents and has a bunch of guardrails against all these problems. Before ChatGPT, it was easier in some sense because we were using like database systems, which are not as hard to like uh, work with, but again, they were not as performant as well. So students have this new kind of superpower with Jill Watson in the classroom, but at the same time, we have been more concerned about these problems. So this has also kind of led to a question about how like instructor's role in the classroom is going to change, and TA's role is in the class is going to change because there's fewer questions to them now. But at the same time, we're not sure how, like, we can't analyze all the conversations. So uh, it's more, it has become more important to have things like dashboards that can analyze these conversations at scale. But that can only help so much. So I was actually wondering if you all have thoughts on this. How the instructor and this educator's role is going to change as AI becomes more powerful.
I think it's a very good question that all of us thinking about what the whole world is thinking. What's the educator role will look like and how it should or it will change. Sometimes we have a say in it, and sometimes it's a natural progression. But typically, I think if I look at it from the educator role, some of the roles of the educator is to facilitate the input and to prepare the input for the learning experience from preparing materials and content, some points that Professor Punya mentioned, and how that will change eventually. What is curriculum in the future? What is content? What is good content or quality content? Who will decide that? Is it the publishers that are publishing books or no? Knowledge will be, and curriculum will be different, and it will be available massively. And so maybe the input element of knowledge is addressed. Now you will come to the process of learning and the process of learning that is facilitated by educator. I think a decade ago or more, we were talking about the role of educator from being a teacher to a facilitator. How will that change? How the process of learning will change with AI? That also as a process and will be big. There will be big shifts in that process, and the experience of learning will be shifting. And I think AI will play a big role in that. Now, there is a big question of how the education system and policies will cope with that. You will see ministries of education and education officials telling you We know that, we understand that, but we don't know how to enhance our policies and education accreditation and certification process around that. And because AI is moving at a very fast pace, we will wait and watch how it will evolve. And everybody will be waiting. Teachers will be waiting. Students will be using AI in everything except learning and education and having fun with it. So there are big shifts, and there are, opportunities that we won't know unless we try. And maybe sandboxing, trialing, driving these will have big impact. For us as digital school, where we focus within marginalized, we truly believe that the context is totally different. So this is why I said it before. Every dollar that we will invest and every effort that we will invest in AI within education for marginalized, the return and the impact will be far more than any implementation AI in general education, like in developed countries, because the needs are different. So maybe the typical use cases you will hear about them in US or London and Dubai are kind of I wouldn't call it luxury, but it's beyond higher level thinking and higher level use cases. But if we manage to really make great use case of AI within marginalized to prepare teachers to be a better teacher, to prepare individuals to be a teacher, to prepare students or to guide the students in literacy and numeracy, very specific use cases, then the impact of that will be huge because we will be able to scale education in an unprecedented way. So these are the potentials of AI in education. And this is where I was looking at use case that will have a huge impact at scale.
That's really, I love that. And I think that the idea that you said that particularly in terms of scaling, in terms of on groups who have typically been marginalized, the potential for this is huge. One more layer to add to that, which I think is something that as educators we have to think about, and actually we are confronted to think about, is this idea of assessment. And I think what AI has done is driven a wedge between, we used to have this, what I'd call an alignment problem in education, which is we used to take writing an essay as being a proxy for thinking, solving a problem in math, on pencil and paper or whatever, as a proxy for understanding. What AI has done is driven a wedge between that and said that, I can do this for you. And so that's where I think that the challenge really comes for us as educators to think of better ways of getting students to deal with the friction of learning. And to me, that can only be for the good, because for too long, I think in education, we have rested on certain ways of evaluating student learning and understanding that were honestly inadequate, and we knew it, but we were sort of just chugging along because life was fine. And I think what AI has done is sort of revealed that the emperor has no clothes. And now we really have to try to confront, how do we know that students are truly engaging and learning, which pushes us to think about new pedagogical models, which are going to be much more process based, which are going to be much more problem based, which is only for the good, which is something that was long overdue. They've been seen in pockets, but now I think it's just put it out there for everybody to deal with. So just this one piece, I think, about how AI can truly be transformational because of its subversive nature.
Any interesting examples that falls into that will be good to mention. Please, Karen.
So, like I taught a class last semester, I'm teaching one this semester. Now, this is a master's doctoral seminar, like the one I'm teaching this semester, but I have like 4 high school students in their class, and I have PhD students at the same time. And that's only possible because AI is flattening the space. I don't have final exams. It's all project-based things, and it's looking at where are you and where are you going to end up. So I don't expect the high school student to end up in the same place as a master's student or a PhD student. But the opportunities in the playing field is pretty flat, right? And so that's my little micro experiment sort of that I do in the opportunities that I get here to really try something completely different, which I could not have done before uh, in with the other previous technology. So that would be sort of one example. I know, Karan, I'm sorry, you were saying something.
because of AI now, this for students, there's no better time to be like it's the best time to be curious. And earlier you had to like find an expert to ask your complex questions, and I don't know, chase professors or other like senior students to discuss things. But now you have something in your hand you can ask anytime. So that's definitely going to reduce the divide between, like, if we can provide access to AI tools to marginalized communities. But this also, and Pune, you mentioned this in your course also. I think there's this shift towards more agency for students. So teachers, in some sense, not going to provide as much guidance, but lead students to develop things early on rather than focus more on theory. They can start building stuff and learn as they go. And but I think what still remains really important for teachers to teach is the scientific process in, for example, science course, and the engineering mindset, problem solving, defining the problem, looking for what like tools can I use to solve these problems. And that mindset is still, I think, very important to teach. But the content itself has become very easy to access.
Punya, maybe you mentioned the example that if I understand that right, you remove the entry requirement and you said, you know what, you are all in, and based on your learning and effort, your progress will be captured and you will fall in one of the, I would say, knowledge progress tracks of this domain. So you are removing the entry barrier, but you are having a systematic way to capture the learning through throughout the process, and you don't have like pass or fail. You have attained knowledge and like a barometer of how much you attain that knowledge.
Yeah, so the high school students are actually getting credit through their high school because ASU won't give them credit, right? It's more complicated than that. But I mean, this is a very interesting experiment I'm trying this semester because, like I said, I have four high school students. I have their teacher in my class in the same equal as as the high school students. I have one undergraduate student who's actually getting paid to be in this class because that's part of his professional development working for the university. I have 11 master's students in UX design. I have four PhD students from MLF, Mary Lou Fulton. I have two from music and ed, and I have two clinical faculty from Mary Lou Fulton who are equal participants, not getting credit, nothing. So I have just built a band of people saying we are going to explore and play with this medium of AI, in whichever way that we can, and the projects that they all do are different. So few things that I would say for us to think about that I have designed into the system. One is that there is always what I call, again, I'm stealing this idea from Perkins, that there are no tests per se, but there are continuous performances of understanding. Every time we have a discussion, it has to be represented in some shape or form, whether it's notes on a Google Doc or whether it's a presentation that they have to build, whether it's a limerick that they have to write about what we talked about. There always is something that makes concrete what was discussed. Almost everything that they do is documented and saved, right? So students, after the end of every class, one group's job is to summarize everything that happened in that class in some kind of a creative way. Our projects are very individual driven. So you are passionate about a topic, let's dig into that. And so you're going to build. So we are basically doing no code coding through the semester. And so they are building these projects, scientific simulations, games, and so on, without writing a line of code, because most of them don't know how to. But again, so those are some of the things that are built into that structure to keep accountability, to keep, the thing moving, and for us to have a continuous sense. And it's completely transparent. Everybody can see what everybody else is doing. So they see where people are moving and who's putting in more effort and who is not. And that sort of guilts people into putting in more effort. So the system is designed to this little community of 26 people, of which I am one. I have a little more power than the rest, but at the end of the day, we are a completely as flat as can be within a higher ed system.
As you describe that, I'm thinking about the workplace that our students all across the world are graduating into. And it's a workplace that has a lot of similar characteristics. There are people of different ages and backgrounds. There's a variety of things happening simultaneously that people are participating in. Some of them are they own, others they don't own, but they're valuable helpers and advisors to somebody else that has something that they own. And in a sense, a learning objective of the course is learning how to cope in a system like that. I'm struck by how the AI companies keep pushing individual tutoring as, the ultimate education model. And there's a lot of problems with that. But one problem is that even if it works well, it doesn't prepare you for work because anything that AI can tutor, AI will be doing in the workplace. So you're not going to be doing what the tutor taught you. And you're not prepared to cope with anything else because the tutor is just personalizing and making life tailored for you and easy for you. And then you get to the workplace and that isn't how it goes.
There's a lot of one-on-one tutoring, quote unquote, that's happening in my classroom. The challenge with one-on-one tutoring and personalization is that there is no context within which that's happening. Somebody else has determined you need to learn how to balance an equation, right? Here, what's happening is because you're working on projects that are driven by you, that you're accountable to other people in your group and so on, you go to the AI to learn X or Y or Z in within a context. And I think that's critical. And though explicitly it was never a goal, because I didn't know that I would end up with this fascinating mix of people. That's where I ended up because I just promoted my class all over the place, and whoever showed up, I'm like, come on, join the party. But you are absolutely right that there is this thing of working as a team. So we spend a lot of time in the beginning sort of figuring out norms for how we work with each other because we have so much diversity within that space. And so I hope that that would be something that they will learn to take forward about working in professional spaces as well.
I'd like to go back, Dr. Waleed, to something that you said earlier when you talked about the fact that there were specialized courses that you had worked to develop with ASU on social emotional learning, learning experiences to help teachers with that, and learning experiences to help students with that. And I think that one thing that could be said in general about marginalized students, uh, and every instructor has students who've been marginalized. I have in my teaching at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, I have students who've been marginalized, is that the social emotional part becomes important because those students carry a kind of anvil around their necks in terms of the beliefs they have about themselves that society has pushed into them and the dispositions that they have that have been determined by the context that they're within. And I'm very skeptical about the ability of AI to provide effective social emotional support. For me, that's on the end where we don't yet know how to do that with large language models, and maybe we never will with that particular technology. Maybe that's just a unique human support. But I think that one of the things that can happen if AI does a better job with the sort of knowledge and skills is it frees up the teacher to have more time and energy to put into the socially emotional support, the modeling for students of how they can be successful and so on. I don't know if that's the way that you're thinking about it, but it seems to me that that's an opportunity to complement AI by doing something that it can't, but it gives you more time and energy to do that complement.
Well, I think I agree with you because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it was very careful thinking in terms of, shall we introduce AI for students, and what's the impact? What are the potentials? We are cross culture, cross border, so few things we can't control. Maybe if some damage happened here within the UAE, we can't contain. We can't manage. We can't take the blame. But cross borders, you need to be very careful, especially the students we are talking about have experienced difficulties beyond others. At the same time, I think we both agree, and we've talked about it when we were starting the digital school, that although those students come from underserved or marginalized communities, but the resilience on those students relatively, and we expect it to be much higher than traditional students in our schools, because they've been through many experiences. They've seen, they did it the hard way. So it's something that we need to consider in our thinking, and not to kind of think of those students as, less, intellectual or less able to express. They might be better than many of the students that we have here. Now, social emotional learning as a course and as a program, we try to focus on educators and how we equip them with the skills to capitalize and enhance their skilling program. Where AI comes into place and where we are trying to drive AI is on how we can prepare more teachers to take trainings, social emotional or general training. How we can make the learning and the training experience for educators more engaging, more informative, because after all, you are dealing with adults who are mature and who are trained and certified as teachers. So AI can be the companion for teachers and their training program and their discussions around different topics related social emotional, to content, to curriculum. This is where you can, and I truly believe that where if you prepare the teachers with the right tools and with the right skills to use AI, they will become super educators. They will become much more powerful educators that can engage with the students, that can deal with different scenarios and considerations, especially if you provide them with the tool that is informed AI, if I would call it, because it will look into a really informed pool of knowledge to give back into the different cases or challenges that they face. So this is where we believe you will have much, much more power for educators and scale in terms of how we can really prepare educators at scale. We are working with Mario Fulton College of Education, a new program, not to prepare teachers with technology and how to use technology. It's a program that we are trying to build on how, through an online self-paced or partially guided program, we can prepare anyone who can read and write and meet the typical, pre-requirements to be a teacher assistant, to solve the global crisis of educators. Going through the traditional path of college degree and then you go to teacher college, we will not get anywhere. We will have very, very slow pace. So we were looking how we can build this course that is online, self-paced, at scale, empowered by AI and guided by AI and guided by some mentors that prepare anyone to be a teacher assistant. We're not saying a teacher, and in this, or a community educator. And in this way, we can really scale preparing generations or big numbers of educators, especially within marginalized communities, which I think it's coming into reality soon. But the question will come: AI and how we can use AI, and is it affordable and accessible? Which we will come to a question to ask Karen. How far are we in terms of AI and making it, instead of large language model, to small language model, to offline version of AI? These big questions that will really open the limits, I would say, for us.
To talk about a specific example of how teachers' time has been freed up, we have deployed Jill Watson in so many courses since ChatGPT came out. So it came out in November 22, if I remember correctly, and we were already deploying in beginning of 2023. And what we have definitely observed is, so compared to previous version of Jill Watson, now we can answer far more questions, far more complex questions, like comparing different things. Students have asked Jill Watson to quiz them and so on. And teachers have given us feedback that their time has definitely been freed up. There's far fewer emails in their inbox now from students in their classroom. And now we're also working on this dashboard, which is going to provide analytics on these student questions. And we want to try to identify what are the kind of teaching gaps or learning gaps in other sense in the classroom and how teacher can fill them. So I think in terms of educator training, it's not just that the time is going to free up to uh, use for providing more emotional and social support in the classroom, but also AI plays a role in how they can analyze what's happening in the classroom, really. And so that also has to come as a part of teacher training, how to use these tools and I guess support students in better ways.
And one thing I think the
I
most impressive, Chris, just quickly, impressive
no,
uses of
go
Jill
ahead.
Watson, I think, is when we got on Silver Lining for Learning, we got leaders from the community colleges. And so it's no longer restricted just to Georgia Tech. And speaking of issues of equity and so on, to me, that was a really powerful episode that we had when we had the Georgia Technical College system, whatever, I don't know the exact
Yeah,
term.
technical college system of Georgia.
Thank you. Okay, good. So I did get part of it right. It was actually quite impressive, that episode of taking something which you guys had built for sort of computer science classes, built it out then within Georgia Tech across a range, and then to take it to an audience which is very different in its mix. And I'm sure there are things that you're learning along the way, but to me that was a very impressive thing for us to learn about and see. So.
Thank you, Professor Punya, Karen, Professor Chris, for sharing your expertise, your vision, uh, and your aspirations for and where we can get with AI in education for educators. Thank you to our listeners for joining on this second episode of the season 2 of Digital Education Dialogue. And we will be exploring much more interesting topics and potentials of how AI can really disrupt and is disrupting education in a better way, and making it more affordable, more accessible, and more enjoyable, hopefully. So thank you very much, and stay tuned.